There is a nut in the mountains of Italy that contains more vitamin C per serving than a lemon and fed entire civilizations for 1,000 years. Not per pound, per serving. The same amount you would eat. More vitamin C than the fruit we are told to eat for vitamin C. For over a millennium, this nut was ground into flour, baked into bread, and stored through winter to feed mountain communities from France to Greece. 100 kilograms per person per year. That is 220 pounds. Each family depended directly on the harvest of 2 or more trees to survive. Then in 1890, 5 factories opened in one French region alone, and cutting down the trees became 7 times more profitable than harvesting them. 14 years later, a fungus from Asia killed 4 billion trees in 50 years, and the nut that sustained Europe's mountains became food for the poor. You are watching Buried Harvest. We uncover the foods, knowledge, and systems buried by history and industry. Every episode, we open one more forgotten vault. If you want access to the full archive, subscribe now. This is today's Buried Harvest. The story of the chestnut. The bread tree. The tree that fed millions. The impossible thing about the chestnut is that it should not work as a staple food. Nuts are fat. Grains are starch. This nut is starch. It contains less fat than almost any food on earth. 1 to 2 grams per 100 grams. Walnuts contain 60. Almonds contain 50. This contains 1. It is the only nut that contains vitamin C. The only nut that can be milled into flour that rises. The only nut that fed civilizations, and for reasons that had nothing to do with nutrition. It nearly disappeared. The archive opens in the year 100. When Rome controlled half of Europe, Roman soldiers did not carry chestnut trees for food. They carried them for wood, rot-resistant timber for buildings, fences, barrels. That was the value Rome saw. But the tree grew, and the people who lived under those trees, in the mountains where wheat would not grow, discovered something Rome had not calculated. The nut could be dried, ground into flour, stored for months, baked into bread that stayed fresh for 2 weeks. It became the grain that grew on slopes. Pollen records show the turning point. Around 100 AD, during the height of Roman expansion, chestnut pollen explodes across Western Europe in quantities never seen before. They expected timber. They expected charcoal for forges. What they found instead was a system that would outlast the empire and sustain the Middle Ages for a millennium. This was not famine food. This was premium grain. In medieval Italy, landowners included clauses in rental contracts, requiring tenants to plant and maintain chestnut trees every single year. By the 9th century, feudal estates in Tuscany were storing chestnuts in warehouses at the disposal of lords, not as emergency rations, as taxable wealth, as rent payment. The tree had a name in 4 languages before most people alive today were born. In Italy, calderoste. In Corsica, fasciole. In Spain, castagnata. In French, l'arbre à pain. So what did they know? Let me tell you what is actually inside. 1 serving of roasted chestnuts contains 43 milligrams of vitamin C. White rice, the grain we are told to eat as a staple, contains 0. Wheat contains nearly 0. The chestnut contains as much vitamin C as a lemon. That is not 2 times more. That is infinite advantage over grains. A nut that prevents scurvy. A nut that acts like citrus and grain at once. Chestnuts contain 715 milligrams of potassium per 100 grams. They contain half your daily copper, 40% of your manganese, 15% of your folate, but it gets stranger. Chestnuts contain 480 milligrams of gallic acid per 100 grams. A clinical trial showed 15 milligrams per day reduced artery inflammation by 24%. 1 serving contains 30 times the dose that reduced inflammation in a controlled study. And unlike pills, this came with fiber, minerals, complex carbohydrates that release energy slowly for hours. The other anomaly is what chestnuts do not contain. No gluten, almost no fat. a glycemic index of 54, lower than white rice, lower than most bread. Medieval Italians did not have a word for celiac disease. They did not need one. The grain growing in their mountains was already gluten-free and had been for 1,000 years. So here's the question nobody wants to answer. If this nut fed millions for a millennium, why does it not feed us now? The answer has two catastrophes. The first catastrophe was economic. Chestnut wood and bark contain elegitannins, compounds that bond with leather, making it durable, valuable for the tanning industry that clothed industrial Europe. 1890. The Ardèche region of France. 5 tannin extraction factories open. The calculation is immediate. Felling a tree for bark and wood extraction pays 7 times more than harvesting nuts. You cannot extract tannin and grow food. You cannot process bark and keep the tree alive. You cannot run a factory on seasonal harvest when year-round production pays more. The leather industry did not suppress the chestnut through conspiracy. It suppressed it through accounting. Every chestnut tree became worth more dead than alive to the people who needed money. Across France and Italy, the equation repeated. Landowners sold trees to tanning factories. Factories extracted tannin for leather belting that powered industrial machines. The bread tree became industrial input. Then came the second catastrophe. 1904. The Bronx Zoo in New York City. A forester notices American chestnut trees dying in patterns never seen before. The fungus is identified as Cryphonectria parasitica. Origin, East Asia. Arrived on Japanese nursery stock imported decades earlier. Distributed to gardens and estates across the eastern United States. The fungus enters through wounds in bark, grows through cambium, girdles the trunk, kills everything above ground in 1 to 3 years. Then produces millions of spores. Wind carries spores. Rain splashes them. Birds move them hundreds of miles. By 1930, the blight has spread across the entire natural range of American chestnut, 4 billion trees. That is the estimate for how many American chestnuts died. By 1950, 80% of mature trees were infected. The dominant canopy tree of Appalachia reduced to understory shrub. 1938. The fungus appears near Genoa, Italy. 1946. France. 1951. Switzerland. 1963. Greece. The pandemic crosses the Atlantic and burns through European groves. But here is what stopped the European extinction. 1950s. Northern Italy. Researchers find chestnut trees that survive infection. The cankers heal. The trees live. Something is different. They discover a virus, THV1, a hypovirus that infects the fungus itself, weakening it, allowing trees to fight back and seal off wounds before the canker girdles the trunk. The virus spreads naturally through Europe but not North America. European chestnuts survive. American chestnuts die before the hypovirus can save them. 1 pandemic. 2 outcomes. Geography as fate, but the damage was complete. The nut that had fed millions was now associated with poverty. Backwards mountain villages. Primitive peasants, too stubborn to grow modern crops. 1770. A writer describes chestnut bread as giving a sallow complexion. 1841. Another calls it mortar, which is called soup. Not food, mortar. Building material pretending to be nutrition. 1966. A French historian writes of the land without bread. Deficient. Member of the Internationale of Poverty and Chestnut Trees. Not the tree that sustained, the tree that proved backwardness. The lesson was clear. Grow wheat. Grow corn. Grow cash crops that feed cities and generate tax revenue. Abandon the mountains. Let the old trees die. Progress meant leaving chestnuts behind. By the mid-20th century, consumption had collapsed. From 100 kilograms per person per year in mountain communities to 1 kilogram, from 220 pounds to 2 pounds annually. The orchards were abandoned. World War I had already taken young men who would never return to graft trees or maintain terraces. The next generation moved to cities for factory work, but here is what they could not erase: the chestnut itself, the knowledge itself, the fact that in certain places the tree still grows and the people still remember its name. But knowledge does not die. It moves to the edges. It survives in the places industrial agriculture cannot reach or does not want: the mountains, the islands, the margins. In Corsica, they still call it fagioli when roasted over fire. The chestnut flower holds an AOC designation since 2006, PDO since 2010. Farina castignina corsa, Corsican chestnut flower. The region of Castagniccia is named after the tree. 70% of the land was chestnut forest in 1770. The identity of place: they make polenta, a polenta from chestnut flower. They brew pietra, a beer made with chestnut flower that has become the most popular beer on the island. 6% alcohol, caramel flavor from the nut. In Italy, calda roast are sold from street carts every autumn. The smell of roasting chestnuts marks the change of season in mountain towns from Piedmont to Calabria. Marrone di Cuneo, Mugello chestnuts. Both hold protected designation of origin status. Premium varieties that command premium prices. Not famine food. Artisan grain. Culinary tradition worth protecting by law. In Spain, La Castañada happens every October 31st. Catalonia celebrates with roasted chestnuts, sweet wine, and songs. The festival predates modern Halloween by centuries. It never stopped. In Portugal, Dia de São Martinho, St. Martin's Day, November 11th. Families gather around bonfires to roast chestnuts. The tradition marks the tasting of new wine. Ancient agricultural calendar still followed, but it was incomplete. Half the world never forgot. The other half was taught to forget. Taught that wheat was civilization and chestnuts were poverty. That progress meant abandoning the mountain, and now the system that replaced it is under pressure. Climate change hits hardest where industrial agriculture is most intensive. Monocultures, chemical dependency, soil depletion, water scarcity driving costs upward. 2024. Greece reports 50% decline in national chestnut harvest. Some regions, 90% loss. Extreme heat, prolonged drought. The tree that survived 1,000 years struggling under new climate, but the chestnut has advantages industrial grains do not. It grows on slopes too steep for tractors. It requires no fertilizer. It needs no pesticides when healthy. It prevents erosion. It sequesters carbon. The wood is still rot-resistant, still valuable for furniture and barrels. The leaves can feed livestock. The flowers produce honey. One tree, multiple incomes. That was the medieval insight, still true today. You cannot patent the chestnut. It has been cultivated for 2,000 years. The genetics are open. Anyone can graft. Anyone can grow. No corporation controls the germplasm or charges royalties per tree. You cannot spray chestnuts with glyphosate. They are trees, not annual crops. You cannot tie them to pesticide purchase agreements or seed contracts that expire every season requiring new payments. You cannot process chestnuts in standard grain facilities. They require specialized drying, careful peeling, different milling equipment. The entire industrial infrastructure is built for wheat and corn. Not this. You cannot store chestnuts like grain without processing. Fresh nuts spoil in weeks. They must be dried immediately after harvest. Traditional knowledge, specialized equipment, labor that costs money in modern economies. You cannot compete with subsidized commodity crops on price alone. Wheat in America receives billions in farm subsidies. Corn is backed by ethanol mandates. Chestnuts receive nothing. Market forces tilted by policy. But the calculations are changing. China now produces 80% of global chestnuts, 1.9 million tons annually. Most consumed domestically. The market they never lost, Italy, the country that invented chestnut civilization, now imports 24,000 tons per year. Largest importer in the world, buying back the food it once grew on every mountain slope. The imports come from China at $1,565 per ton. Italian chestnuts sell for $6,530 per ton. 4 times more expensive. Quality difference. Local terroir. Short supply chain. American consumers eat less than 1/10 of a pound of chestnuts per capita annually. Chinese consumers eat 5.7 pounds. Europeans eat 1 pound. The knowledge gap matches the consumption gap exactly. United States chestnut imports have grown 3% annually since 2019. Domestic production cannot meet demand. Michigan grows 40% of American chestnuts. It is not enough. The market exists, but supply does not. The American Chestnut Foundation is breeding blight-resistant trees, backcrossing Chinese resistance into American genetics. 15/16 American genome, enough resistance to survive. The goal is restoration to eastern forests. Scientists at SUNY developed a hypovirus delivery system. Viral RNA inserted into fungal DNA allows sexual transmission of the virus that weakens the blight, the biological control Europe got by accident. America engineers deliberately. Switzerland and Italy have restored thousands of hectares of abandoned chestnut orchards since the 1990s. Government programs. EU funding. Recognition that the tree stabilizes mountain communities and prevents rural depopulation. The European Union grants protected designation of origin status to regional chestnut varieties. Legal protection for traditional cultivation methods. Premium markets for quality products. Cultural heritage, recognized as economic asset, but the underlying tension remains. Industrial agriculture wants annual crops on flat land with mechanized harvest and centralized processing. Chestnuts are trees on mountains with hand harvest and distributed processing. That moment is now. The choice between systems, between consolidation and distribution, between erasure and preservation, between forgetting and remembering what fed people before oil powered everything. So here's what you do. If you live where chestnuts grow, find the trees. They are still there. Old orchards on abandoned terraces. Grafted varieties planted by grandparents who remembered. Harvest happens October through early November, depending on region. The nuts fall when ripe. Spread nets underneath. Shake branches gently. Gather quickly before mold sets in or animals take them. Score the shell with an X on the flat side before roasting. This prevents explosion from steam pressure. Roast at high heat for 15 to 20 minutes until shell splits and interior softens. Fresh chestnuts must be refrigerated and used within weeks or dried immediately. Traditional drying takes 1 to several weeks over wood smoke. Modern gas dryers work faster but lack the flavor. If you have liver disease or severe kidney problems, limit consumption. The tannic acid in raw chestnuts can cause irritation. Cooking neutralizes this. Roasting or boiling makes them safe for nearly everyone. Learn to recognize quality. The shell should be glossy, firm, heavy for its size. Avoid any with holes, soft spots, or mold between the shell folds. One bad nut spoils the batch. Reclaim the name that industrial agriculture tried to erase. Not the bread of the poor, the bread tree. L'arbre à pain, the grain that grew on slopes where wheat would fail. Every person who plants a grafted chestnut is one more node in a network that existed for 1,000 years, was nearly destroyed in 50, and is rebuilding itself from the edges inward. Every person who learns to dry and mill chestnuts into flour is one more link to knowledge that sustained mountain civilizations through medieval winters when no other grain could be stored that long. Every person who roasts chestnuts over fire in autumn is participating in a tradition older than nation-states, older than the concept of poverty attached to it, older than the economics that nearly killed it. This is not nostalgia. This is recognition that the solution to future food security might look less like genetic modification of annual grains and more like restoration of perennial systems already proven over centuries. The system under pressure is not the chestnut, The chestnut survives drought better than wheat, needs no fertilizer, grows on marginal land, sequesters carbon, prevents erosion, produces for 500 years. The system under pressure is the one that requires petroleum for fertilizer, aquifer depletion for irrigation, genetic patents for seed, subsidies for profit, and annual tillage that releases carbon and destroys soil structure. The advantage chestnuts have is time. They were here before industrial agriculture. They will be here after. The question is whether we remember their value before or after the crisis forces us to. The tree they cut for tannin, the tree they killed with imported fungus, the tree they taught you was backwards. That tree contains more vitamin C than the lemon, less fat than any nut. The tree that fed 100 kilograms per person per year to medieval Italians and Corsicans, the tree that still grows on slopes too steep for tractors in places that remember its name. Medieval farmers knew. The tanning industry definitely knew. The corporations that profit from commodity grain subsidies know. Now you know. The knowledge is no longer buried. The chestnut is still here, still growing in Corsica and Calabria and the mountains of Greece, still producing vitamin C and potassium and complex carbohydrates from nothing but rain and sunlight, still offering an alternative to the petroleum-dependent grain system, still proving that trees can feed civilizations, still waiting for anyone willing to remember what mountains knew for a millennium. It can feed you. If this opened something for you, subscribe. Every share helps preserve knowledge they spent a century trying to erase. The next vault opens soon. This was Buried Harvest. The chestnut. The bread tree. It fed millions for 1,000 years. Then economics made cutting more profitable than growing. Then disease killed billions. Then we forgot. But the tree remembers. And now so do you.